Welcome to another episode of Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen. Of course, I'm your host, JJ Kitchen. It's been an interesting week. We're now 2 days removed from the new settlement between Florida State and Clemson. A lot of debate back and forth of who won, who's lost, where's the state of the ACC. Commissioner Jim Phillips. When does Florida State and Clemson leave? What's the total numbers? What's the exit fees? We're going to talk about all that stuff here today. And first, before we get into it, obviously, the show is sponsored by Colonial Beer, located at 4986 Library Road in Bethel Park, PA 15102. As you can imagine, plenty of different selections, multiple different lagers between heavier lagers, lighter lagers, but more importantly, they're great people. Great people from top to bottom that are willing to help you on any day given the week, and they're willing to help you out and looking for the needs, and especially, too, whether it's tailgating, parties, anything that you need, they're there to help you out. Make sure you go see Colonial Beer located at 4986 Library Road in Bethel Park, PA 15102. The show is also sponsored by Thompson Law Group with Brian Thompson. Call them at 724-799-8404 or visit them at thompsonattorney.com. Again, Brian Thompson, a guy that I use personally, a guy who certainly will answer your questions, guide you through the entire process, but more importantly, make sure you get the questions that you need answered. Unlike a lot of larger law firms, he'll be able to sit down with you, have a consultation, a free consultation, and make sure they figure out a directive plan to make sure you are successful. Thompson Law Group with Brian Thompson. Again, call them at 724-799-8404 or visit them at thompsonattorney.com. Well, the first things first, a massive, massive day the other day, obviously, with the ACC, multiple different directions of where we're going to go. We're going to go through a number of different things, get you the numbers that you need to know, who won, who lost, where is this going? Is the ACC safe now? Is it safe now in 5 years, 10 years? We've got a lot of solutions here, and more importantly, digesting a lot of what happened. The first thing is first, going to share my screen here with you guys. And again, go over the statement here with the ACC obviously releasing a statement. A lot of fluff in here is what I would actually look at it and really continue to look at it and call it. But first and foremost, as you can see here, the statement really from the ACC is one that's already here. As you can imagine, actually move this out of the way for you guys here. There we go. Obviously, when you're looking at it here, the statement from the ACC, Clemson University, and Florida State University announced today that they have resolved an ongoing legal disputes. With the resolution, Clemson and Florida State will remain full members of the ACC, and the parties will dismiss all pending lawsuits in the states of Florida, North Carolina, and South Carolina. As part of the settlement, the members of the ACC have agreed to build upon the previously announced success initiatives, which is one of the biggest things moving forward. Obviously, the success initiative, making more money. Obviously, that'll benefit Florida State, Clemson, teams that go towards the top. Obviously, teams like Clemson who continue to reach towards the top, getting them more money by creating an additional revenue distribution model that is based on viewership. The new innovative model will continue to support the entire membership while adding a component directly focused on annual football and men's basketball viewership. As with the success initiatives, ACC member schools will have the opportunity to earn success, increase revenue distributions from the ACC media's revenues, and will be incentivized to take actions that enhance viewership across the ACC's 18 member schools. Obviously, 17 obviously with football, but 18 altogether when you include Notre Dame, who obviously has all the non-revenue sports and basketball in the ACC. Today's resolution begins the next chapter of the storied league and further solidifies the ACC as a premier conference, said ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips. I don't know about that, but as we look ahead to our collection long-term future, I want to express my deepest appreciation to the ACC Board of Directors for its ongoing leadership, patience, and dedication throughout this process. The league has competed at the highest level for more than 70 years, and this is a new structure demonstrates the ACC embracing innovation and further incentivizing our membership based on the competition and viewership results. The settlements, coupled with ACC's continued partnership with ESPN, allow us to focus on our collection of the future, including Clemson and Florida State, united in an 18-member conference demonstrating the best in intercollegiate athletics. Obviously, the first things first, obviously, when you look at that from a top-level perspective, yes, they did go towards a conclusion a settlement that they work towards as of right now to leave the ACC on today. Obviously, here in March of 2025, it's $165 million to leave the conference right now. And we'll go over who's really won and who's lost this overall, but $165 million, which I do not expect anyone to pay, especially dating till 2030. This will actually decrease $18 million a year. The exit, obviously, from the ACC, the grant of rights exit will be $18 million less per year. In 2031, the exit will be $75 million, and it will not go below that. But I think that's something to hold on to, especially, too, where I see this going. You see, obviously, the TV viewership, but more importantly, the network contracts are up after the 2030, 2031 year. With a number of these institutions from back and forth, that's a big year overall for college athletics, but more importantly, college football. I think you'll be seeing a lot of movement in between there. But as we go around before in the winners and losers, one more, obviously, David Hale, to give a little bit of a statement here, did a really good job breaking a number of this stuff down as well. And I think it's really important to talk about a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff that they show here. And this is really the biggest thing. You look here. Let's see here. Let's do a quick summing up of the implications. Obviously, David Hale, over at ESPN, did a lot of analysis back and forth, what it looks like here and there. Let's do a quick summing up of the implications of yesterday's ACC settlement and what it means for the near and long-term future. Come along for the journey. Did FSU and Clemson win? And this is one of the big comments we'll be talking about later on. Short answer, yeah, mostly. If the ultimate goal was to exit the ACC as soon as possible and land a full share in the SEC or Big Ten, as Oklahoma, Texas, UCLA, and USC did, then no, this is not an ideal outcome. But everything else is pretty great for them. And this is kind of where I put it too. I think it's a win, but it's also still a loss because they win because you know the number they need to get out. And that's really for any school in the ACC. Obviously, North Carolina, Miami, schools like that didn't even have to spend any money. They really used Florida State and Clemson and their millions of dollars that they had to spend in legal fees to know what they needed to get out. Financially, if Clemson and FSU or another school hit benchmarks for ratings and postseason play, they'll earn money in the ballpark with the SEC and Big Ten, give or take $5 to $7 million. And they've secured some certainty on what exit costs would be if and when they choose to leave. That's pretty much a home run for both. And for what it's worth, more than what Michael Alford asked for 2 years ago. And that's the league's leadership wouldn't even consider back then. It's an even bigger home run for say, UNC Miami, which I just said, get the same flexibility and access to money without having sued anyone. So the grant of rights was pointless. This is a huge, huge point here, and we'll talk about this later on. That's complicated. Truth is, we don't know. The lawsuits were never got beyond arguments or over venue and motions to dismiss. We didn't even really learn anything about the legality of the grant of rights, which I think was part of the point here. Also, and I think when you look at that, if you put it into a 10-step process to where we are here talking about we didn't even reach the grant of rights level of dismissal, I'd say we were in really in legal terms, how it was told to me through numerous sources, we were really in phase 2 of phase 10 of the process. That's how early on this is, and we'll go over more why ESPN's more involved in that and what could really be portrayed behind the scenes. If a court had struck down the grant of rights, there would have been a massive ripple effects for the way the sports and media companies interacted, and nobody wanted that. It would have been a terrible precedent to set from a business sense and could have thrown the entire enterprise into chaos. So why would the ACC agree to this if the grant of rights would hold? 2 reasons. They weren't sure it would, at least in Leon County, Florida, it makes a lot of sense, especially with the judge that was down there. But also, too, here, if the judge ruled in favor of Florida State, the ACC could have appealed, then appealed again, and the whole process might have been drug out for years. It's already been 14 months, and they had gotten almost nowhere, which is a complete fact. We weren't anywhere near the conclusion of it before the settlement. The ACC appetite for proactive legal battles was low, and the damage being done in terms of legal costs and reputational harm, plus the uncertainty that accompanied it, was hurting the league in dozens of small ways each week. The settlement, however, hurts the league members in a big way, but it's the way they can at least anticipate and adjust to. It's certainly in structure, and that was preferable to the chaos and infighting, particularly because most view 2030-ish as an inflection point either way. Isn't the ACC dead in 2031? Well, dead is a nebulous term, but good chance the ACC looks much different in 2032 than it does today. but that was likely to happen either way and may also happen to every other league in college football. More on that in a minute. The cost for Florida State to exit the ACC without winning in court today would have been between 500 to 700 million. According to the FSU lawyers, they weren't going to pay that. But by 2031, that number would have been more like 300 or less. At that price, they might have gone regardless. And just going through a number of different things here, and that's assuming enough hadn't challenged the landscape of college football. So now the ACC has a runway, likely 6 years, though there's some flexibility for their schools too, to get in-house in order to prepare for whatever comes next. What's at the end of the runway? One possible answer is more of the same. Let's assume for a minute we don't go to a super leagues or have a huge next round of realignment. The ACC is actually well positioned to keep schools for the same reason they've incentivized to stay today, a beneficial mix of good, not great money and great, not average playoff success. Assume Clemson and FSU are free agents. Where do they go? I've maintained that they have a home in the Big Ten or the SEC, but at what money level? If an invite was akin to what Oregon and Washington got from the Big, the value just isn't there, which I agree. Right now, when you look at overall Oregon and Washington, they're in the Big Ten right now, but they're also taking only a 30% value, a 30% stake in the conference right now. They're forfeiting 70% because, one, the money is just not there. They're adding more schools. Obviously, the Big Ten didn't want to cut the pie more than the ways they are right now. So right now, Oregon and Washington are really losing a lot of money. They're taking a 30% share in the conference. That's really not good. And if you're a team like Clemson or Florida State or North Carolina or Miami or any of these teams in the ACC, if you leave, you're paying $165 million to go make less money, by the way, than you would be in the ACC. It just doesn't make any sense. The first opportunity to leave would be in 2031. Would you rather be in the ACC, and he goes into it here, would you rather be in the ACC making $25 million more than your league mates with an easier path to the playoff, or SEC making $25 million a year less than your league mates in a more competitive conference? That's an easy question to answer. Now, as I've discoursed before, there are tons of issues that make the question more complicated than I just laid out. But you can see how we might get to a point in which leaving for greater pastures doesn't make sense. Again, who knows what 2032 looks like? ESPN is in the business of maintaining an attractive balance sheet. And if it decides keeping the ACC together, reminder, they're on the hook through June of 2036. Is good business. They can sweeten the pot to keep those schools where they are. And this is a very good point here, by the way. Talking about in 2032, the grant of rights technically by 2032 is down to $75 million, which tells you ESPN is willing to be negotiable when it comes to 2032 and potentially keeping these teams in here. I think with ESPN lowering the grant of rights to leave goes to show, I think the ACC is going to go through a number of negotiations leading up to that point to keep it alive, because ESPN has been so invested, over $300 million invested into the ACC network, and they're not willing to lose that money right now. Also, too, David Hale talks about a potential Super League. There's been a lot of conversation in terms of that. Obviously, CBS, Fox, ESPN, NBC. What does that look like in 2032? Does the college football world break off, obviously, from the NCAA, which I personally think is going to happen? They're going to break off because there's just more money to be made out there. But more importantly, you're going to see it in a number of different levels. But it says here 6. But that's not going to happen, right? Impossible to say. A lot can change between now and then, which I agree. 5 years is a long time. Usually a long-term plan in business, obviously in corporate America, you would say a long-term plan is about 10 to 15 years. That was about 20 years ago. In today's world, a long-term plan is between 3 to 5 years. Just goes to tell you how things have really sped up over time in business, but also, too, in college athletics. That's why this process was such a win for Clemson, FSU, and UNC, UVA, Miami, because now they have flexibility to be noble amid chaos. So think about this scenario. The ACC money isn't what those schools want. The Big 12 deal is up too. The SEC and Big aren't offering full share invites. What can they do? Well, now the notion of independence or creating a whole cloth new league is entirely in play. And that's really between the ACC and the Big 12, and potentially all of those leagues being up. The Super League now continues in terms of all 4 of those leagues. Not saying that this is likely, but now schools have options. Options in the flexibility and changing landscape equals leverage and power. That's probably the single most important takeaway from all this in the big picture. One other important note, Phillips' addition of Cal, Stanford, and SMU was critical here. It gives ACC numbers contractually with ESPN and votes against dissolving. They're adding money to the bottom line and providing security for the future. It was a shrewd addition. Okay, so the ACC isn't dying. Again, we just don't know, and I can't stress this enough, how much outside factors, political climate, locally, nationally, relationships with athletes, employees, courts, finances, and higher ed, TV distribution, etc., play a role in shaping this. One of the biggest reasons the ACC fell behind in the past, I think, is how many schools, presidents, ADs had their heads in the sand about the reality that's not true now. There's a big ticking clock, and now that's a good way to make things progress even faster. Worst case scenario, the remaining ACC teams, let's say 4 schools, leave for another conference. It's $300 million payday for the remaining members. That's nothing, and combined without a possibility reduced. That's nothing, and combined without a possibility reduced ESPN deal. It's enough to survive a bit longer still. Survival in the game now. Let's see here. C12. Oh, yeah, Pac. Obviously, the Pac-12. The biggest reasons the ACC fell behind in the past. Okay, we did that. Worst case scenario there. Okay. What about all the FSU fans clowning you on X now? FTR, I've never used the words ironclad. And from the beginning, I said the grant of rights was legal impediment. Okay. So the odds of SFC being in the ACC in 2024 and 2027 were high. In 2020, 30, 32 were low. I wouldn't change a word of that. Did the money get reduced? Yeah. If they'd stayed in court, it might have just happened anyways, or may not have. Again, we don't know. The next grant of right signed by the ACC schools or others will still have some meaning, and escaping them will require either litigation or negotiation. They matter, but how much they matter, how ironclad they are, it is a discretion of the conferences now. Where does this leave us? And this is the last one. Clemson and FSU mostly got what they wanted. The ACC gets stability for 6 years and some kind of assured parachute if it blows up after that. Independent schools get flexibility long-term and consistency short-term. That's a win all around. Even if it's not a basically put together for anyone or good for anyone is what he's saying there. So that's kind of where we are at this point. And I think that's a massive factor. Obviously, a lot of information thrown at you guys and how we're going to break it down here. Obviously, it's going through a number of different factors. The first one is to go through it. Did Florida State and Clemson win? The answer right now, as we stand here today, is yes and no. One reason why they did win, and it's a clear win in this way, is we know an exact price of what it means to get out of the ACC. It's that simple. You look at the ACC, it was between 500 to 700 million. No one had a direct price. Well, right now we know it's $165 million. In 2031, it'll be $75 million. I think that David Hale puts out a really good point there, which I was going to relate to, is that right now, because of the initiatives, the brand initiatives, the TV viewership, and then the success initiatives, if you win, plus TV viewership, that'll help out. Do I agree with the TV viewership one? Not at all, because it doesn't lead to success. Florida State was number 2 in viewership in the ACC this year. They went 2-10. They got slaughtered in the ACC. They got destroyed. But still, they would be in a great way to make money. Do I agree with it? No. Do I agree with the success initiative of the unequal revenue sharing? Yes, I do, because the teams that are providing the most value by winning should be getting more money. I agree with that 110%. So in that way, I think they did win. And they won in a big way, in my opinion, because one, it was reduced. But also we know what the number is going forward. That's really the biggest thing. The way they lost, they're still in the ACC. Both of these schools are in the ACC, and it looks like, by any type of imagination, business-wise, they're here for the long term. And really till 2031, 2032, when the new TV contracts come out. And by that time, clearly ESPN reduced it. I think that that's a note behind closed doors that says there's clearly a big manufactured idea that's currently coming to the table in the next 5 years in terms of college football. And again, a lot can change in 5 years. And I think it will change a lot in 5 years. It's a fact. But in this way, it's a loss because Florida State told its fans it would be out by 2026, which is clearly not going to be out, or out by 2025, which we heard numerous people, other people here on YouTube saying they were going to be out, people on a number of different ways on ESPN saying they would be out. They're not going to get out. They're only going to be out by 2031, when really the TV revenue is up, and obviously the grant of rights is down to $75 million, and reconstruction of college football and the TV distribution wise is around and changed all around the country. So again, we go into that right there. Obviously, too, when will they leave? In my opinion, I think if they do leave, and depending upon what happens in the next 5 years, it's going to be 2031, 2032 when they have a spot. Because right now, I don't think they have a spot right now. And I think it's pretty clear. But also, too, from a business perspective, would you rather go to another conference where it's harder to go, where you're really adding all these teams into the two conferences? It's harder to get to the national title game, harder to get to the playoff. Plus, you're making $20 million less dollars because you're only taking a 30% share, like a Washington, like a Oregon, which they have to do until 2031 as well, which is going to be a rough stretch for them. Obviously, I don't think Oregon will have a bit of an issue there because obviously the Phil Knight money will kick in, but Washington will certainly not have its way. Plus, with all the travel and whatnot, it's been a tough go for them. But I think that's when you could potentially see them go, and I think that's when it could potentially change. But like David Hale said there, for ESPN to lower it and know they're still on the hook till 2036, I think there's a reconstruction. And when it comes to that point, I think ESPN kicks up more money. Also, too, I think, and we'll talk about this in another video, I think unequal revenue sharing is coming to the SEC and Big Ten. If you're in the SEC, why should Texas, Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia share money with Mississippi State, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Missouri? Why should they share money with any of those schools? Same thing goes with the Big Ten. Why should Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State share money with Minnesota, Rutgers, Michigan State? Why should they ever share money with them? It doesn't make any sense. Iowa, why share money with them when they're not producing at a high level like you are? Those questions are going to be had, and we'll be talking about that in another video. And again, if you have not done so, subscribe and like this video because you'll be getting that dropped pretty soon here. But obviously, that's the biggest thing. It's $165 million today, $75 million in 2031, 2032. I don't see any changes coming in the near future in terms of the ACC, who's leaving and who's going until 2031 when the new TV distributions come out, or when they create the Super League and potentially they go off and leave the NCAA. The biggest thing is I want to hear your comments. Do you think they leave anytime soon? Do you think this is a good thing for the college football, this whole new distribution? Overall, where do you see college football going? I want to hear your thoughts, but more importantly, do you see them leaving anytime soon? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Please like this video, subscribe, more videos to come. As always, guys, as always and forever, hail to Pitt, hail to the ACC, but more importantly, hail to college football. I'll see you guys next time.